Thank you so much for joining us, Assistant Secretary General.
Sure, thank you for having me.
What would you say were the big key takeaways from the 2025 World Social Report? And if you can, explain the principles of equity, economic security for all, and solidarity, and why they are so key to sustainable development.
Absolutely. I'd like to just show the report because we're really proud of it here at UN DESA. And it really showed some quite interesting developments in the field of social development. So I'd like to start by really underscoring that when we look back and compare with 1995, and we had our big social summit in Copenhagen, we have seen great progress. More than 1 billion people have escaped extreme poverty, for example. But what the report shows is that while we have made progress in many areas in social development, that progress is under threat, and in some instances or some respects may even be slipping away. We have a number of almost a third of the world's population, while not in extreme poverty, are at the next level of poverty and are at risk of slipping into poverty. I'd hoped had moved away from that. We see wealth inequality increasing. So more of the economic prosperity that we are achieving in the world is accruing to the wealthiest people, so we see greater inequality. The biggest message from the report this year is how we see growing distrust. So the inequality, but also the perception of inequality, is fueling distrust, and that threatens social cohesion.
Does it seem that the social safety nets that a lot of countries and regions have had is become less, with the resources not being as much, governments having more higher priority issues to deal with? Does that lead to people feeling insecure?
What our analysis shows is certainly that there is a great feeling of insecurity across the globe. It's not limited to one region. More than half of the world's population are worried about their economic situation and about the safety for themselves, economic security for themselves and their families. We know that of the roughly a third of the world's population that are just above that extreme poverty line are 1 or 2 less paychecks away from slipping into poverty. But the biggest risk factor from what we've seen in our analysis is medical expenses. So that unexpected big healthcare bill can push a family that otherwise would be able to manage over that threshold into extreme poverty. And that tells us something about where we need to enact policies. And it also shows how important it is to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal on universal health coverage.
Conflict and climate change, I mean, those are big factors in contributing to some of this insecurity. Can you tell us more about what is being done in those areas?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. When we look at where we find the extreme poverty today, we see that it is concentrated in areas of conflict. We have never had as many wars in the world since the Second World War. So that risk is increased. And the compounded with environmental degradation, climate-fueled extreme weather events and disasters that push people into poverty, but also keep communities in poverty. The problem with conflicts and that kind of these kind of disasters or external shocks is that it's very, very difficult to create the conditions that you need to have a sort of a sustainable development, the steady development that you need to enable people to get out of poverty. So again, we can't just do one thing in isolation. It's all interlinked.
Do you have any success stories or any regions or countries that are making good progress, that serve as an example of what you hope others can work toward?
And what we've seen in China with 800 million people escaping extreme poverty in a relatively short space of time serves to illustrate that it can be done. It's possible to lift millions of people out of poverty. What China did through economic transformation, through rural transformation, through getting people jobs, to increasing productivity, but using the outcome of that economic transformation to invest in social infrastructure, to invest in education, and to ensure that that wealth was distributed and made sure that you had services for people, and more recently, quite good social protection with financial redistribution and making sure that people are protected against economic shocks. Is that there are some lessons to be learned there.
I want you to look ahead to November and to Doha and bring us to the World Summit for Social Development. And what needs to be done between now and then? And what do you hope comes out of that?
Last year at the General Assembly, the member states adopted the Pact for the Future, where they said we want a second World Summit for Social Development, 30 years after the first one in Copenhagen in '95. They said we need to revisit how we think about social development, and we need to make sure that we emphasize that social development dimension of sustainable development. So we have the three. We know there's a lot of work on the environmental and climate dimension of sustainable development, very important. There's a lot of work on the economic dimension of sustainable development, very important as well. But it's equally important that we really lift up and strengthen that social dimension of sustainable development.
Assistant Secretary General Sandkjær, thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.